Welcome back to the First Team. I am Joe DeLeone, and joining me as always, my two co-hosts, Matt Sims, former NFL and college QB, also founder of the Sims Complete QB and host of the Sims Complete podcast with his dad, Phil Sims. And then, of course, we've got Ryan Roberts, who is less exciting, Irish Breakdown recruiting analyst, NFL draft analyst. Today, we're going to be doing, we did a few weeks ago, a Los Angeles Rams off-season NFL draft preview. We're doing that with the Chicago Bears, and we're going to be doing a bunch of these as the NFL draft is not too far away, and free agency is going to be coming up very, very soon. Today, the Chicago Bears, a team that holds the first overall pick, the 9th overall pick, they're in a quandary. What do they do at quarterback? What do they do with all these other picks so they can position themselves to compete and win in the NFC North? And on that note, guys, I want to start us off with the important conversation that needs to be had that I think we're all on the same page of. What do they do with their quarterback situation? Do they decide to move on from Justin Fields? Do they draft Caleb Williams? Do they trade out of the pick? Matt, I want to go to you first here because you're the resident quarterback expert. What do you think is the smartest move for the Bears in this situation?
Well, thank you for calling me an expert. That's the first time in my life that anyone's ever used that word in describing me. And to answer your question as best as I possibly can, I was not a believer in Justin Fields. I highly doubted him as a high-ranking, high-profile prospect coming out. I just didn't see, the quote-unquote intangibles that everyone talks about, all these different things. I didn't think that he's as pure of a thrower as I thought he needed to be successful in the NFL. Early on, I was like, yep, told you so. Now, this last year, I really do believe that he has turned the corner. I do believe that he has become a better football thrower. I believe that he has gotten more accurate. He's been able to push the football down the field like we expect him to do more consistently, but he's also shown that he's become more accurate in that intermediate and that touch throwing aspect that I feel like every great quarterback in that needs to do in the NFL. So I think Justin Fields is blossoming in the right direction for the Chicago Bears. Stick with Justin Fields. Establish some sort of contract with him that keeps you team friendly because he hasn't obviously done enough to really show that he is the future of the franchise for the next 10 years like a Patrick Mahomes has done. Sign him to a team friendly deal. Understand that you are trying to build the team around him. Let him know that you are trying to get players in free agency to build around him. Stick with Justin Fields. Don't go for Caleb Williams and continue on the track that you're on right now with the Chicago Bears and building around Justin Fields.
Well, this is the $1 million or the $40 million question, isn't it? Right? Whether you're going to stick with Justin Fields or you're going to move to the next stage of a potential rebirth. I don't know what the correct terminology would be. And I think that, look, this is my opinion on the whole situation, and it's been for a while. And Joe, I know we've especially have talked about it for a bit. I believe with where the Bears roster is, and we'll get into obviously some of the needs during this podcast, I just firmly don't believe that even if Justin Fields does become that guy, which I agree with you, Matt, in the sense of I do think he's shown a lot of improvements over the last couple of years, and I think that he is trending in a better direction. I don't think it's stagnation. Like, I don't think that he has just been the same exact player since day one that he stepped foot in the NFL. There has been progression.
Right.
My problem is that with where this roster is right now, I'm not so sure that when you finally are able to turn over this roster and get it to the point of contention, that its winning window will match up with the same winning window of Justin Fields, because Justin Fields is about to go into year 4. Sooner than later, you are going to have to give him a big contract. It's going to happen, because although I'm not sure that he's worthy of being a 40 plus, I mean, literally, Spot Track just came out with a thing, Joe. I don't know if you saw this on Twitter, but their projections, and they're pretty spot on usually, was about $47 million a year for Justin Fields on average.
That's
and that
insane.
Right now, I think it would be crippling to the organization, and not because Justin isn't good or not because Justin Fields can't be a good player, but because if you're putting that much investment into him, which is going to happen soon, entering his 4th year, I mean, literally, this is going to be a conversation over the next couple months as far as if he is your guy, you're going to have to start to pay him pretty soon here. When you give him that type of money, that means that there's going to be less ability to allocate support into other areas, allocate money into several areas for the problem is with giving these quarterbacks big money is that they better be elevators at that point, because you're not going to be able to put as much around them as you would with a quarterback that is on a rookie contract. So I personally believe that this is an opportunity to change the quarterback landscape for the Chicago Bears. I would move on from Justin. I would get as much as I could for him right this second, and I would go to Caleb Williams. I would go to resetting that quarterback window, because I just don't think the Chicago Bears are ready to be that team in the near future with Justin Fields. I believe there are maybe a couple other organizations that if Justin Fields went to right now, I believe that the windows would match up a lot more clear and it'd be a lot better transition to potentially being a contending team. But where the Chicago Bears are right now, I just don't think those windows match up. So I think right now, what you're going to be able to get from Justin Fields in a trading opportunity, with him not having that big deal on his docket yet, with having flashes of some really good stuff over the last 2 years, I feel like you can get as much back from your investment now and be able to reset that quarterback window and finally be able to rebuild this roster that does need a lot in order to be that winning team long term.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions, with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts. I come down on the middle of where both of you guys are in this. I agree with you, Matt, that Justin Fields showed us a lot of huge positives this past year. Like that's something that I feel like gets glazed over a lot when we have this discussion, is that so many people are so quick to say, not even give him credit for improving. Nobody wants to give him credit for looking competent. But the problem at the end of the day is, I think a lot of what's going to motivate this decision is what Ryan just said. And I think that if they really like Caleb Williams, that's what's going to lead to the motivation on if they keep Justin Fields or if they trade him. I think there's also, I would much prefer what you said, Matt. I would much prefer that they trade out of the pick, and there's a ton more value in accruing multiple first rounders and having this ability to just continually to bolster the roster. But there is a really good point here by Ryan that, say Justin Fields, with these picks, you make the roster even more promising. They just barely missed the playoffs this upcoming year. They look really good. They're going to have to pay him so much money that they're not like the Bengals. They're not like the Chiefs, where it feels justified in saying, let's put all this money towards the quarterback, and we already had some exposure to the Super Bowl, and we'll figure out ways to make things work. It's, let's put all this money to Justin Fields, but we still haven't gotten to the playoffs. That's where I think it gets really sticky.
That's also where I feel like, do the Bears maybe, let's say they do stick with Justin Fields, right? Let's say they do want to keep playing this game with his growth at the position. Does he become the next Kirk Cousins at the position, where he starts to get franchise tagged to buy them time to figure out what they want to do? Is that their plan? Sure. That would be something that I would be considering for Justin Fields too. Franchise tag at the position of quarterback isn't the worst franchise tag in the NFL. So no. I would be thinking about that proposal to buy time for the overall perspective of how I'm going to really structure my team for the long run. Because think about it from the coaching staff's perspectives here too. Caleb Williams, let's say he struggles the first 2 years, most likely you're out. So this is where the whole regime really needs to double down and really believe in whether it's what we got right now or what we got coming in the door next, because either one, you're only going to have about another year or two for you really to hold on to the opportunity of the title that you have currently.
So it's going to get really hairy, because I was just going to say it's going to get really hairy, because I agree with that mindset, Matt. Like, if they were able to do that, where they're able to kind of string it along a little bit, still compensate him, obviously, but still keep it open to, hey, if things don't work out long term, we can still transition here. Like, we can make this kind of work if it isn't the right guy long term.
Right.
But then you get into that little weird spot of, but what if Justin Fields is not quite good enough, but also too good that you never have the opportunity to pick number 1 overall or get your potential quarterback in the draft that you really want either. That's like why that middle ground is so fascinating, because
Yeah.
you can get stuck. It's quarterback purgatory is kind of what
Mhm.
I call it, right? Where it's like you're good, but you're not quite good enough, right? Like, do you need to maybe take a next step forward or turn the page to make it to that next level? But then you're stuck with, do I have now the does I have everything in place that I'm able to now make that transition, because I put myself in kind of that weird middle ground of not being good enough, but not being bad enough either to be picking that high. So it's very,
Right.
very
Yeah.
fascinating.
It's one of the more bizarre NFL draft scenarios that we've ever really seen, because they did finish the season really strong, but then they hold the number 1 overall pick, which almost never happens when there's a trade that occurs. So, like, it is just unbelievably nuts that they go back to back years of having this first overall pick. And there's just going to be so many factors that I really don't think that there's necessarily a wrong answer to fixing this. They're, at the end of the day, in a position to hold the right cards to make an effective
Right.
decision. They're not going to kill themselves either way. And if he goes on to be successful, Justin Fields goes on to be successful elsewhere, that's not a negative for the Chicago Bears. Now, talking
Right.
about this 9th overall pick, because we understand, as much as we have thoughts on the situation, it feels like it's trending towards the Bears taking Caleb Williams. What other position of need do they need to address in the first couple of
Yeah.
rounds and in free agency? We'll talk about some fits in a quick second, but if we were able to push out some of those needs, we can go over the entire roster, because there's a lot of stuff that needs to get figured out. But for me, the ones that stand out, guys, I really think that receiver, they need to add some weapons. They need to find themselves a more, an additional running back into that room. And then I would go as far as to say any safety linebacker help would be, actually, maybe not so much linebacker, but like defensive tackle
No.
help would be good for their front seven.
Yeah, I don't know if you agree with this, Matt, but like to add on to what Joe said, like first and foremost, I think a 9th overall pick is actually the more fascinating one, because I actually think that's a decent trade back opportunity, because there's gonna be a couple runs that start in the top 10 where you're like, a team might be willing to give up a little bit of capital to be able to make sure they get that 9th overall selection right before the top 10 ends. But that's another conversation for probably a different day or maybe a little bit later in this podcast. But I would add on here, Joe, I think that left tackle is certainly on the table, in my opinion. I know that they drafted Braxton Jones a couple years ago, and he's been okay, but you can always upgrade that position. Left tackle is such an important spot that I would not count that one out. Secondary pass catcher outside of DJ Moore, I think, is huge for them. They really had DJ Moore, Cole Kmet in the passing game last year, and a whole lot of nothing otherwise. So some secondary pass catchers, I think, is big. You mentioned safety. Eddie Jackson hasn't been good over the last couple years, and then
I
now he's
believe they're
out
moving on
this
from him.
offseason
Yeah.
as well. Yep. And then cornerback, because there's a lot of uncertainty of the future long term of Jalen Johnson, who's a really good corner, but obviously you need to be able to make sure that you have enough players in that room to be sustained. And then my last spot, and this is crazy because the Bears need a lot. Like, they need a lot. This is not a quick fix for the Bears, man. They put a lot of capital and money into Montez Sweat, but I would also argue that they need a second pass rusher as well, opposite Montez Sweat. So there's a lot of needs we can go through here, man. There's a whole lot.
Yeah, there definitely is. This is where I kind of find it interesting too, for just the free agency aspect for the Bears, because there are a lot of good free agents out there that you can spend really good money on that I think will change the way that your team is viewed immediately. Someone that I think too, just, and sorry to get away from the draft for 1 second, but just
No, you're good.
one position, right, that I think that the Bears can immediately upgrade at, right, and add depth and be able to play really good zone and man coverage with having a dog on the outside. Hey, go out there and get L'Jarius Sneed. I think L'Jarius Sneed has proven that he is absolutely one of the best corners in the NFL. He is tall, he is long, he is physical. He can win at the line of scrimmage versus tall and physical receivers. He does a great job of overpowering smaller size receivers and has shown that he can play outside and in slot areas too versus guys like Brandon Ayuk in the Super Bowl. So he would be an absolute double star next to his name free agent that I would be interested in, because if you get him out there on the outside, you could be way more flexible with how you play your secondary and the multiple coverage that you can add with someone like him at your disposal, especially in that low and high red zone area where he only gave up, I want to say, 3 total touchdowns the entire NFL season. And the 3 that he gave up came in the playoffs versus the best opponents that they've seen the entire year. To go back
Matt,
to that 9
no,
spot. Sorry, go ahead.
well, no, I was going to ask you a question, but finish your point before I ask you
To
a
go
question.
back to that 9 spot, this is where I say just keep your faith in Justin Fields. Get out of the 1 spot, trade it out there, get more trade value. And at number 9, I'm drafting Brock Bowers, the tight end, and putting him with Justin Fields in that offensive group. I'm adding versatility as a guy that can do a little bit of everything, right? He's a great pass catcher. He's going to add to the passing game. And then I think there will be some more valuable athletes, receivers later on in the draft where you can add depth to that position too.
So you brought up drafting L'Jarius Sneed, and Matt, just from like there's so many team needs, as we keep saying here. Which of the team needs, just from like if you're looking at it, would you try to address in free agency compared to the draft?
I think Ryan is exactly correct with just, can you add another guy on the edge, right, for the Chicago's Bear team? You know, even to go back to the Kansas City Chiefs, if you can lure Chris Jones away from the Chiefs, right, to Chicago, because every year you're seeing Jordan Love twice, you're seeing Jared Goff and that offense twice, right? We don't know what the Minnesota Vikings are to do with Kirk Cousins, but we know that, you know, Coach O'Connell knows what he's doing as far as the offensive side. So I feel like you need guys on the front line to make sure that you can get after the passer and also just win the physical aspect of the game at the line of scrimmage and stopping the run at times as well.
Yeah, and to that benefit too, the Bears are in a good position where they could go spend some money on a defensive tackle, another edge rusher, and then later on in this draft, there's so many good defensive tackles like Michael Hall, DeLeone Carter.
Yeah.
There's so many good options later on in this draft that even like a Keith Randolph somewhere on day 3 that they could just get some bigger bodies. I think that that's a really, really strong approach.
Even a Danielle Hunter from Minnesota. I mean, what about adding him to the opposite side of the sweat there? That's a good tandem, a veteran tandem that would be really a dangerous force to play against.
They have $66.9 million in cap space, so there's certainly money that can be spent. You like the idea of getting Brock Bowers and having this dual tight end weapon system of him and Kmet. And I also did another show the other day with Will McFadden, and he had this same pick in his mock draft. I brought up the possibility of drafting Bowers also doesn't put you in a difficult spot to have to re-sign Kmet to a massive deal. When in reality, most of these big tight end contracts, these second contracts, they very rarely pan out. I think of like Darren Waller is like the first one that comes to mind where got paid all that money and hasn't really done anything since. Austin Hooper's another one that comes to mind that do you really want to spend the money when you can draft somebody and have somebody young for a few years and have them within your team for 5? Ryan, your thoughts though at that 9 spot. What do you like as a good draftable player if it's not Brock Bowers?
I mean, I want a pass catcher for sure. I mean, that's kind of my ideal scenario, especially whether you stay with Justin Fields or you reset the quarterback clock and you do a Caleb Williams in this early in the first round. You still need to get pass catchers to be able to help give them the support that they need to develop into really good quarterbacks on the NFL level. So I would be throwing out guys like Roma Dunze from Washington, who's kind of that really, tall, vertically oriented outside receiver. If you want to take a shot on a guy like a Keon Coleman out of Florida State, who's a big body pass catcher who needs more nuance to his game, but is absolute freak show from a height, weight, speed conversation, you need to get a pass catcher. And I think that you also need to get size is the other thing that I would say. So I would be completely open to a Brock Bowers because we can label him a tight end all we want, right? He's a 6'4" pass catcher at the end of the day. He's a guy that I can move around all over the place, and he brings size to that room where I don't have much. I mean, the only real great wide receiver on this team right now is DJ Moore, who is about 6 foot, 210 pounds. He's a smaller guy. He's going to play inside a ton. You need to find length and size to position. So if I'm whether it's a young quarterback or Justin Fields, a younger quarterback. Justin Fields is still a young quarterback. Whether it is whatever quarterback you end up going with, I think big body, athletic pass catcher to win outside the numbers would be big for this team.
I got one for you right now. Draft Brock Bowers at 9. Take him at 9. Go get yourself who over there in Tampa Bay there, Ryan? Get yourself Mike Evans.
Mr. Mike Evans?
Get yourself
oh
Mike
my
Evans.
God,
All right.
that would be pretty nuts if they'd turn
So
around.
now
and do
you
that.
got that size, you got that athleticism, you got the young Brock Bowers in that skill group. I mean, talk about now that's a dangerous little crew right there on the offensive side of the football. And then get me a little Bucky Irving there late in the 3rd or 4th round. And I'm talking, we got a skill group right for the future.
Matt should be the GM of the Bears. I
don't know about
actually before we wrap here, I do really think that this is a really unique opportunity for a team like the Bears where their offense has sucked. Like we got to just be completely honest. I'm sorry, Bears fans. Their offense has been terrible for the past 5 years. It feels like maybe even longer than that. Like even to when they had Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey. Like that's the last time I felt threatened by the Bears offense. This is an opportunity to, like what you just mentioned, to go spend the money on a premier receiver to add him to the room. You could at that 9 spot draft Brock Bowers. You can then come back around in the 2nd round, third. Actually, I don't think they have a 2nd round pick, but the 3rd round end up with a guy like Ricky Pearsall or Jermaine Burton who falls into your lap, who are good speedster to play that tertiary role within the offense. And then there's some really good running backs that are going to be spark plugs like Bucky Irving, or maybe you want to get that downhill barrel type of a guy like Audric Estime. There are so many great options for a team like the Chicago Bears to completely revamp their offense, and they need to take advantage of the strengths in this year's draft to do so.
This draft for them this year, to me, is can you do what the Detroit Lions did with this draft? You got 2 1s, a 3, I think 3 4s, right? You can
2 4s.
make 2 4s. You can make some hay with changing the way that you view your team for the next 3 or 4 years if you hit on at least 2 or 3 of those picks as being immediate impact players for you, like the Detroit Lions. So, pick high quality character guys that kind of want to be the monster of the midway type of players, right? Just football juggernauts that way that fit the mold of Chicago Bears defense and mentality and just playing ugly and winning ugly in that NFC North division.
Any final thoughts, Ryan, before we close?
Offensive tackle is another spot with pick 9 that I would at least consider, depending on how the board falls. If there's an Olu Fashanu that's staring at you in the face out of Penn State, I would very much consider it, because I think him, along with Darnell Wright as your bookends long-term, would look a lot better in Chicago, potentially.
Awesome. Love that pick.
Love it, guys. We just fixed the Chicago Bears. They're a Super Bowl winning team now. At Joe DeLeone, at Sims Complete QB, wait, what's the new? You changed your handle. What is your handle? I've been saying it wrong for
just Sims
weeks.
Complete. It's cool.
Okay,
yeah, don't worry.
At Sims Complete, and then
just
at
start
Rising
writing
Draft.
Sims Complete. You'll figure it out. Yep.
Right, it'll come up. Make sure you also subscribe, folks, and then drop a comment below if you agree with some of the guys that we threw out there. Maybe we missed a name you want to hear more about. Drop that comment below. Subscribe. We'll be back. Enjoy the rest of your week.